I never thought much about visiting my friend's house. To me, it was just another place to hang out, to waste hours over video games or argue about music. But that evening felt different the second I walked through the door. It was her voice I heard first. Warm, steady, carrying easily from the kitchen. She was humming something under her breath, a tune I couldn't quite place, and for some reason, I paused in the hallway just to listen. My friend shouted something over his shoulder. He was already halfway upstairs, but I found myself rooted there, suddenly aware of the gentle rhythm of her presence. When I finally stepped into the kitchen, she turned, and it was like the whole room shifted. She had this calm, collected grace that instantly made you feel both welcome and nervous at the same time. Her smile was quick, genuine, but her eyes held mine just a little too long, as if she were measuring me, trying to read the things I didn't say out loud. "You've grown," she said lightly, her tone playful but her gaze intent. "Last time I saw you, you were still a boy." I laughed it off, muttering something about how a couple of years could change a person. Still, the words lingered in me. Not because of what she said, but the way she said it, like she wasn't just noticing my height or my voice, but something else beneath the surface. She brushed past me on her way to the counter, her hand briefly steadying my arm as if to balance herself. It was the smallest touch, almost nothing, but it left behind the faintest trace of her perfume, warm and subtle, like citrus softened by something deeper. My pulse quickened before I could stop it. I tried to focus on the ordinary things, the clink of cups, the soft light spilling across the wooden floor, but every detail seemed sharpened by her presence. Even the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear drew my eyes, though I looked away quickly, embarrassed at myself. My friend's voice carried from upstairs, calling for me, but I hesitated. She caught the pause and smiled again, this time softer, almost secretive. "You don't have to rush," she said, her tone casual but edged with something else. "He'll survive a few minutes without you." It was nothing, really. Just a passing remark. Yet I felt it settle inside me, as though her words had carved out a quiet space that belonged only to us. In that moment, I realized something had shifted. She wasn't just my friend's mom anymore. She was a woman, confident, graceful, and for reasons I couldn't explain, suddenly more present in my thoughts than I was ready to admit. And as I finally made my way upstairs, I couldn't help but wonder why the sound of her voice and the ghost of her touch lingered so much longer than they should have. The next day, I found myself back at their house, though I told myself it was just to hang out with my friend again. That was true, of course, but there was also a part of me that wanted another moment in her presence, one I could never have admitted out loud. We were sitting at the dining table that evening, a soft golden light from the lamps casting everything in that calm glow that makes time feel slower. My friend had gone to grab something from upstairs, leaving me alone with her again. I felt the familiar tug of nerves, like I was standing in a place I wasn't entirely supposed to be. She noticed. I could tell she did, because her eyes followed me in that knowing way, not unkind, but amused. She poured tea into 2 cups, slid one toward me, then leaned her chin against her hand as she studied me. "You know," she began, her voice carrying that hint of mischief, "you're too innocent for this world." The words caught me off guard. I laughed awkwardly, unsure what to say. Innocent? I don't think that's the word people would use. Her smile widened, and there was something almost playful in the way she tilted her head, like she enjoyed watching me fumble for a response. "Oh, but it is. I can see it in you. The way you look down when you're unsure. The way you overthink before you speak. It's sweet, really. But innocence can be dangerous. Dangerous." That word hung between us longer than it should have. Her voice wasn't mocking, it was thoughtful, maybe even a little too sincere. I tried to shift the subject, but she kept her gaze steady, her eyes carrying both humor and something I couldn't quite name. "Don't take it the wrong way," she added, lightly stirring her tea. "It's not a bad thing. It just means the world hasn't gotten to you yet." Her words unsettled me in a strange, magnetic way. Because while she teased, there was truth underneath, and the truth felt heavier coming from her. She had lived longer, seen more, carried herself like someone who had faced storms I couldn't imagine. I caught myself staring, and she noticed. Of course she noticed. Her smile softened, as though she found my discomfort endearing rather than embarrassing. She reached out, her fingers brushing the back of my hand for just a second before withdrawing. "Don't be so serious," she said gently. "I'm only teasing." But I knew it wasn't just teasing. Not entirely. When my friend returned, the air shifted instantly, as if nothing unusual had passed between us. We laughed about something trivial, sipped our tea, and carried on as though the moment hadn't happened. Yet long after I left that night, her words stayed with me. "You're too innocent." I replayed them over and over, wondering why they felt less like a joke and more like a challenge. It happened one of those quiet afternoons when time seems to move differently. I'd gone over, expecting the usual noise of my friend's voice echoing through the house, but instead, he'd excused himself, something about needing to run a quick errand. "Just wait here, I'll be back," he said, grabbing his keys. And suddenly, it was just me and her. The living room felt larger than usual, the silence filling every corner. She was sitting on the couch already, her posture relaxed but graceful, the kind of ease that only comes from someone fully comfortable in her own skin. She glanced at me with a small smile and patted the cushion beside her. "Sit. Don't look so nervous." "I don't bite," she teased. I laughed awkwardly, but my chest tightened all the same as I lowered myself onto the couch. Not too close, but not far enough to feel safe either. From where I sat, I could feel the warmth radiating off her, a subtle presence that pressed at the edge of my awareness. The TV was on, some harmless program neither of us were really watching. Instead, the space between us became its own conversation. Every small movement felt amplified, the shift of her crossed legs, the faint rustle of fabric, the way her hand rested casually on the arm of the couch, her fingers brushing the edge where my own hand rested on my thigh. We made small talk, at first. Easy things, her asking about school, me answering with half-formed sentences, trying not to sound like a kid under a spotlight. She laughed at my fumbling, but not cruelly. More like she found something in my discomfort, charming. At one point, she leaned forward to reach for the remote on the coffee table. In doing so, her shoulder brushed against mine. Just a touch, brief, but enough to send a wave of heat through me. She didn't pull away right away, either. Instead, she stayed close for a heartbeat longer than necessary before settling back. Our laughter carried us into lighter conversation. Something funny was said, I can't even remember what now, but in the middle of her laugh, she placed her hand lightly on my knee. Just a simple gesture, absent-minded maybe, but it landed like a spark. Her palm was warm through the fabric of my jeans, the weight feather-light yet grounding. I froze. My heart thudded so loud I was certain she could hear it. She must have noticed the way I tensed, because her lips curved into that familiar knowing smile. Slowly, she withdrew her hand, as if granting me space again. "Relax," she murmured, almost kindly. "You're safe." And I believed her. Even with the tension stretching between us like a taut string, even with every nerve in my body awake to her nearness, I felt safe. When my friend finally returned, the moment broke. He tossed his keys down, filling the air with noise again, and just like that, she was back to being his mom, casual and composed. But for me, everything had changed. It was late one evening when I saw her in a way I hadn't before. The house was quieter than usual. My friend had stepped out with some other friends, leaving me behind for a while. I was half considering leaving too, but she'd offered me a drink and the invitation felt impossible to refuse. We ended up sitting in the kitchen, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. The only light came from a lamp above the counter, bathing her in a warm glow. For the first time, she didn't look like the perfectly collected, teasing woman I'd come to expect. She looked thoughtful. "You know," she said after a pause, her voice lower than usual, "people think I've got everything figured out." I blinked, caught off guard by her sudden honesty. "Don't you?" I asked, half joking, trying to lighten the moment. She smiled faintly, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Not even close. Her fingers traced the rim of her glass as she spoke, absent and restless. She wasn't looking at me, not directly, but somewhere past me, as though the words were safer if she didn't have to see my reaction. "It's funny," she continued softly. "Everyone assumes confidence means certainty. But sometimes confidence is just knowing how to stand tall even when you're falling apart inside." The air between us grew heavier. I didn't know what to say, but I could feel the weight of her admission pressing against me, asking not for answers but for presence. Finally, she glanced up, and in the quiet, I noticed the smallest details, the tired shadow beneath her eyes, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear only for it to fall loose again. For the first time, she seemed fragile. Human. "I'm sorry," she said with a quick laugh, as if embarrassed by her own vulnerability. "I shouldn't put this on you. You're too young for all that." Her words should have ended the moment, but instead they deepened it. Because even if I didn't have the right experience or the wisdom of years, I wanted to understand her. I wanted to be the one she could say these things to, without apology. "You don't have to apologize," I said quietly. Something flickered across her face then, surprise, maybe even relief. She studied me with that same intent look she often gave, but this time it wasn't playful. It was searching, as though she were weighing whether she could trust me with more of herself. The silence stretched. My hand twitched slightly on the table, wanting to reach across, to close the gap, to offer comfort. But I stopped myself, afraid of crossing a line I didn't fully understand. Still, she must have sensed it, because her lips curved into the gentlest smile. Not teasing. Not guarded. Just grateful. And in that moment, I realized that beneath all her grace and poise, she wasn't untouchable. She was someone who carried her own hidden cracks, ones she rarely showed the world. On some level, I think she wanted me to see them. The night air was cooler than I expected. We'd stepped out onto the small balcony off the living room, just to get some fresh air after sitting too long inside. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of silence broken only by the occasional bark of a distant dog or the hum of cars far away. Above us, the stars were faint against the city sky, but even the faintness seemed beautiful in that moment. She stood beside me, her arms crossed lightly over her chest as she leaned against the railing. I stayed close, maybe closer than I should have, our shoulders brushing now and then. Each accidental touch sent a spark racing through me, and I wondered if she felt it too, or if I was the only one hyper-aware of every inch of space between us. For a while, we just stood there in silence. Comfortable silence, but heavy, too. Her presence filled me with both calm and nervous energy, a contradiction I couldn't explain. I wanted to speak, to tell her something, anything, that might bridge the gap between what I felt and what I feared to say. But the words stayed trapped in my chest. She broke the silence first. "You're so quiet," she murmured, tilting her head toward me. "Thinking too much again?" I laughed softly, rubbing the back of my neck. "Maybe. I guess I'm just not great with words." Her eyes lingered on me for a long moment, thoughtful and steady. Then a small smile curved her lips. That's not true. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. I swallowed hard, caught in the weight of her gaze. It felt like she was peeling back every layer of me, seeing the things I tried to hide. And instead of looking away, she seemed to draw closer, as if the discovery intrigued her. Then she said it, quiet, teasing, but with an edge that made my pulse quicken, maybe someone needs to teach you a few things. Her tone carried playfulness, yes, but her eyes gave her away. There was something there, longing, hesitation, maybe even conflict. I froze, caught between wanting to laugh it off and wanting to lean into the meaning behind her words. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I couldn't do anything but hold her gaze. She chuckled lightly, as though to soften the tension she'd created. But even as her lips curved into a smile, I noticed the way she exhaled slowly, like she was wrestling with something inside. I wanted to answer her, to admit how her presence had been unraveling me piece by piece. But the moment was fragile, balanced on a thread, and I was terrified of breaking it. So instead, I let the silence hold us, thick and charged, as our shoulders brushed again and neither of us moved away. The night air was cool, but standing beside her, I felt anything but cold. We returned inside after a while, the cool air clinging faintly to our clothes. The living room lights had been dimmed, leaving only a soft lamp in the corner casting a golden haze across the room. It felt quieter than before, as if the world had drawn back, leaving only the two of us suspended in that fragile stillness. She set her phone down on the table, then turned to me. There was something in her eyes I hadn't seen before, a gentleness, yes, but also a vulnerability that made my chest ache. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, without warning, she reached up and touched my face. It wasn't dramatic, just the softest brush of her hand along my cheek, her thumb tracing a line as though memorizing me. The touch was feather-light, but it sent a shock of warmth down my spine. My breath stilled. Her hand was warm, steady, and impossibly tender, far more intimate than anything she had said or done before. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the moment wash over me. There was no teasing in her touch now, no playful barrier. It was something else, something that felt dangerously close to confession. When I opened my eyes, she was still there, watching me carefully. For the first time, I saw hesitation in her expression, as if she were silently asking me whether this was too much. But I didn't move away. Instead, I let myself lean into her palm ever so slightly. Her lips curved into a fragile smile, and then she did something that completely unraveled me. She stepped closer and wrapped her arms around me. The hug was firm, encompassing, yet achingly gentle. Her cheek rested lightly against my chest, and in the stillness, I felt the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against mine. My hands found their place at her back, hesitant at first, then sure, holding her as though I'd been waiting my whole life for that single embrace. Time seemed to stop. The world outside faded, the traffic, the distant hum of life, even the ticking of the clock. All that existed in that moment was her warmth pressed against me, her arms keeping me close as if she didn't want to let go. I didn't want to let go either. There was no rush, no urgency, just the quiet truth of two people finding comfort in each other. It wasn't about desire alone, it was about something deeper, something unspoken but undeniably real. When she finally pulled back, her hands lingered at my shoulders, her eyes searching mine. She didn't say a word, and neither did I. We didn't need to. The silence between us spoke louder than anything we could have said. And as I stood there, still holding on to the ghost of her warmth, I realized that whatever this was, it had already changed me. The night had grown late. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels almost sacred, where every sound seems louder and every movement feels deliberate. I should have gone home hours ago, but neither of us had mentioned the time. We simply sat there, caught in the strange, delicate spell that had formed between us. She was still close, her presence wrapping around me in ways I couldn't explain. My heart hadn't slowed since that embrace, it was still drumming steadily, every beat reminding me of how much the moment had meant. At last, she broke the silence. Her voice was soft, hushed, as though she was afraid of shattering something fragile. "You know," she said, her lips curving in the faintest of smiles, "you're not as innocent as you think." I laughed under my breath, though it came out uneven, almost nervous. "Is that a compliment or a warning?" Her eyes lingered on mine, thoughtful and searching. "Maybe a little of both," she said finally. The teasing was still there, but it wasn't sharp or playful this time. It was tender, laced with something that felt almost protective. The way she looked at me in that moment, it wasn't the way a mother looks at her son's friend. It wasn't casual, and it wasn't careless. It was something entirely different. I wanted to tell her how she had changed the way I saw everything, how she had shifted something deep inside me I hadn't even known was waiting to be moved. But the words were heavy, too big to say out loud. So instead, I let the silence hold us, the weight of it soft and full, not uncomfortable anymore but comforting. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. The air between us felt charged again, but gentler now, like the storm had passed and left behind something quiet and real. At the door, I hesitated. I didn't want to go, but I knew I couldn't stay. My eyes met hers one last time, and in that moment, she reached for my hand. Her fingers slipped into mine, slowly, deliberately. The contact was small, almost nothing, yet it sent a rush through me that I knew I would carry long after I stepped outside. She held on longer than she needed to, her thumb brushing lightly across my knuckles in a gesture so subtle, yet so full of meaning. "Good night," she whispered, her voice soft, almost breaking. I squeezed her hand gently before letting go, my chest tight with something I couldn't name. As I walked away into the night, the cool air met me, but it wasn't enough to chase away the warmth she'd left in me. I knew, deep down, that this wasn't just a fleeting moment. It wasn't just teasing, or curiosity, or chance. Whatever it was real. And it had only just begun.